Hello, everybody. I have the honor of introducing Mary Seelhorst. I met Mary now about 35 years ago, and she was a real young pup in the exhibit world. It was actually her first exhibition that she was the curator on. And Bob Staples, for those who don't know, we designed museum exhibits for 45 years. And Mary held us to task, I will say, and she was great to work with. And I think there's almost nothing Mary can't do. So she'll tell you somewhat about Possible Dreams, which was the exhibit based on the 90th anniversary of Popular Mechanics. Shortly after that, at Henry Ford Museum, Greenfield Village, she did an exhibit on Motown. So you want to know anything about Detroit music? Here's your person. She did Drive America also at Henry Ford, and automobiles seemed to be one of her all-time specialties. She's also worked on historic properties in Hawaii and around the country, and a few other things if you want to know. If you have any questions about James Bond's, the Aston Martin DB5 that was stolen from Goldfinger, or it's the Goldfinger car, and it is missing. Mary was a court witness.
It gets weirder.
She also plays the fiddle with country bands, bluegrass, whatever you want. And this is Mary's first time at the Ephemera Society, so please give her a big welcome.
Thank you. Yes, being in bands, I know how to use a mic. Let me get oriented here. Okay. All right. Yikes. Not all inventions and innovations are world-changing. Many of them, even the patented ones, are simply solutions to the minor problems of everyday life or incremental improvements to other inventions. Now, these ideas and inventions often have a short half-life. I have lost the mouse on this. Where is it?
It's in the top.
Oh, there it is. Boy, I can't see it on here at all. Huh. No, that's not. I cannot see the mouse on the screen here. I need to scroll down on my the tab. That's what I'm using. That's what I'm doing. No, that's.
It was on the other screen.
Oh, well, I'm not. No, I need to go back. Oh. Well, I wasn't using that. Okay. Yeah. I'm still. Now, where is it? There it is. Okay.
Yeah,
oh,
then you go,
okay.
You go to the other screen.
I see. I didn't realize that. Okay. I don't do presentations very often, sorry. Okay. So, geez. All right, now I got it. Okay, these ideas and inventions often have a short half-life, if they have any life at all, making ephemera such as magazine articles and period advertisements the only record of their existence. Now, mundane innovations are also an understudied aspect of the relationship between technology and culture. Only a small fraction of inventions are commercially produced, and even fewer become widely used. Yet most studies of invention and innovation focus only on those that eventually came into use, into widespread use, sort of those light bulb moments, if you will. And yet for every light bulb, every cotton gin, every telephone, every assembly line, every Apple computer, there are hundreds of inventions that never make it. So today we're going to look at invention and innovation from the starting point of a persistent problem that people have solved in different ways over time, whether their ideas succeeded or not. So to do this, I'm going to use examples from Popular Mechanics, a magazine founded in 1902, and still published today. But first, a little historical context on this genre of magazines. There were once dozens of titles similar to Popular Mechanics, starting in 1945 was Scientific American, this being its inaugural issue. Now, I'm not going to show first issues of all of these. Mostly they're just ones I had sitting around my office. So we had Popular Science, which is still published, Science and Mechanics, which is not, Science and Invention in pictures, and this cracks me up. This is July 1925, and if you work in an open plan office, the isolator is for you. You just pop that capsule over your head, turn on the oxygen, and focus is yours. I'm not sure how you would use the phone, because this thing doesn't seem to have any ear holes in it. And I don't also understand how the fan would actually cool you off. I don't even know why they put the fan in there, that illustration. Anyway. Then we have Electronics Illustrated. There were lots of those kind of magazines that eventually evolved into computer magazines. Mechanics Illustrated, which was sort of the poor man's Popular Mechanics. There were many more. The list went on and on. There was Modern Mechanics and Inventions, Radiocraft, The Electrical Experimenter. And over time, they became a little less intellectual, like Scientific American was pretty intellectual, and more how-to oriented, following the lead of Popular Mechanics, which was the third oldest of all of these, and the first to use these bold color cover illustrations that are now a hallmark of that genre. It was also the first to include detailed how-to drawings. Now, this type of magazine publishing peaked in the mid to late 20th century when most, but not all of these, folded. But between them, these magazines documented an explosion of ideas, innovations, and inventions, from home tinkerers making their own devices to repairing or improving commercial products to inventors hoping to hit the jackpot with their idea. Now, in the late 19th and 20th centuries, many inventors were basically, and sometimes literally, reinventing the wheel, especially as electricity and then computer chips were applied to the mechanical devices of yore. From small ideas like electric toothbrushes, and look at that big honkin' motor. I'm not sure I would want to put that toothbrush in my wet mouth. So small ideas like electric toothbrushes to big ideas like flying cars. That is from 1906. So first, let's look at the toothbrushes. These electric toothbrushes are both from Popular Mechanics, 102 years apart. Yeah, and I just had to do a screen grab because I don't still have a subscription to Popular Mechanics. So the one on the right is just a screen grab. Then we look at flying cars, 110 years apart. So on the right or on the left is the Flying Auto, the latest motor car, and on the right is a 2016 article. And I wanted to do a close-up, but it just sort of got pixelated when I did it. Underneath the big word car, it says, for real this time, maybe. Flying cars are through the entire run of Popular Mechanics. I love them. So you can already kind of see where I'm going with this. But before I launch full bore into Think It's New, Think Again, I'm going to walk through a couple examples of what I would call Think It's Old, Think Again. Now, these are obsolescent inventions or products that linger in use long past their heyday, even though they've been surpassed by new technologies or new inventions or new ideas. People just keep on using them. And, you know, they still work, they're still used, and sometimes there's still even a locus of inventiveness, even though they're no longer perceived as technology, but more just as stuff that's taken for granted as part of the landscape, like a fork or chopsticks. Those are technologies, but people don't think of them that way anymore. They're just part of the landscape. So let's take the problem of tangled, twisted phone cords. Now, at first, the problem was mostly getting the two cords crossed with each other while talking because the speaker and the receiver were separate elements. But never fear, the cord reel solved that problem once and for all in 1919. But by the 1930s, the speaker and the receiver were both part of a single handset, so most inventions focused on detangling the cord between the phone body and the handset. And you see in that illustration, there's a little swivel at the bottom that keeps the phone cord from getting all tangled up. But even so, patents for retracting the cords between the wall and the phone continued to be issued, like this patent from 1990. So what else was going on in 1990? Enter the cordless phone. Who needs a retractable cord or a detangler when the hardwired handset is obsolete? Now, this is an article from 1989, and you might think that the cordless phone and later the cell phone sounded the death knell for phone cord products, but you would be wrong. Even today, you can still buy devices to prevent tangled phone cords. And yes, some people, maybe even people in this room, still have a landline. So these two actually work almost the exact same way. It's just a little swivel device that, keeps the connection, but it doesn't let the cord get all bound up. But I must point out that the introduction of the cell phone has only exacerbated the problem of ignoring children while you're on the phone. But no worries, I will get to devices that help you safely ignore children in a minute. So let's look at one other think it's old problem, the problem of dirty records. Oh wait, not that kind of dirty records. Tipper Gore solved that in 1985. And I know probably most of you in this room remember how Tipper Gore solved that in 1985. Anyway, this kind of dirty record. So the dirty record problem was solved by record cleaners like the popular Ronco record vacuum in 1976. Cordless, electric, batteries not included. Now, you might think that sales and new record cleaning patents dwindled away when CDs came in, and they did decline, but they didn't disappear, even when streaming came into being. This record cleaner you can still buy today, and this is a patent for a record cleaner from 2014. Not only are vinyl records and record cleaners still manufactured and sold, the cleaners still work as well as they ever did, by which I mean not that well. And I know this because I myself have a 1920 Victrola hand crank mechanical photograph that I play records on about once a week. And it looks a lot like this, only much smaller. Now, I always loved that this made the cover. Good amplifiers hadn't been invented yet in 1916, so why not just make a normal phonograph really big? If you want big sound, big phonograph. And I always wondered if somebody invented a giant record cleaner to go with it. Anyway, those are my two think it's old, think again ideas. So they set the to set the stage for think it's new, think again. I will set the dial of the Wayback Machine to about 1989 to explain how Think It's New, Think Again came to be. So back then, I was a baby exhibit developer at Henry Ford Museum, and that is me in the exhibit that Barbara and Bob and I did. I spent months going through old Popular Mechanics issues dating back to 1902, and that is their first issue, gathering ideas for an exhibit in honor of the magazine's 90th anniversary, which was in January 1992. That's the other one there. And of course, your esteemed Ephemera Society member Barbara Charles and the late Bob Staples were the designers of that exhibit, so I had to include this 1992 photo of them. And this is from the little editor's column in the front of the magazine. I had the February issue. They had the March issue, but I'm not showing you my picture. Haha. So as Barbara pointed out when she asked me to do this presentation, she said, the exhibit itself, being temporary, was ephemeral, and so are the old magazines on which it was based, and indeed many of the inventions and innovations that it showcased also proved to be short-lived and thus themselves ephemeral. So we're ephemeral all around, and I wonder, what have I been doing with my life? It's all just disappearing. So the exhibit was called Possible Dreams, Popular Mechanics and America's Enthusiasm for Technology. If I had to do it again, I would work much harder to come up with a much shorter title, but this is a rendering that I just copied from the magazine's coverage of the exhibit. That's why there's a gutter in the middle of it. So one day I told a friend how cool the old magazines were and that I was surprised to find old examples of so many ideas and products that I thought of as being new. I said, well, maybe we should compare the new and the old products, sort of a think it's new, think again thing. And thus it began. We created 5 Think It's New, Think Again comparisons for the exhibit, and you can see one right here. A few years later, the editor of Popular Mechanics asked me to do a monthly column of the same name on the coveted last page of the magazine. So I wrote about 60 of these, and don't worry, I'm not showing all of them. I've resurrected some to show you today. Now, of course, the items that were new back in 1992 when this opened are like 30 years old now. So I will show you the modern iteration of some of these ideas. And you can already think, there's an app for that. So I will start with my favorite of the 5 that made the exhibit. Back in 1989, Reebok was making a big deal out of its new pump shoe. You just press a button in the tongue and inflate for a custom fit. And I love that it looked like a little basketball. That was so cool. Well, the problem of hurting feet and ill-fitting shoes is not new, and neither is an inflatable solution. In 1920, a hopeful inventor sent this pneumatic insole concept to Popular Mechanics. The pneumatic insole makes walking easy. Basically, there's a little tiny valve sticking out of the side, and you put a little bulb on it and just pumped it up. Pretty cool, huh? So for the exhibit, we bought, brand new, the cross-trainer version of the Reebok pump shoe, and we installed it in a simple flip panel case with think it's new on one side, think again on the other. So you see that shoe in the case, and then you flip the thing over and you see the old article from Popular Mechanics. And people loved these. I think that when the exhibit finally came down, the museum just scattered these around the entire floor of the museum, and people would just, oh, this is really cool. So feet and their comfort, however, seem to be an eternal problem. In 2015, 26 years after the exhibit came down and 95 years after the pneumatic insole was featured in Pop Mechanics, Reebok reintroduced the pump shoe with some design and functionality updates. And that's, another little article about it and an illustration from the article. So without the chronicle afforded by Popular Mechanics and similar publications, there'd be no record of that early pump shoe. I don't think it ever got produced. And there would also be no record of dictaphone calls mother when baby cries. You see, I told you we were going to get to some tech solutions of how to safely ignore your children, and it starts early. This is from 1919. This is, of course, Popular Mechanics. Now, this was the brainchild of a handy husband with an old dictaphone and an inventive mind, and as far as we know, he never tried to patent it or manufacture it. For the exhibit's new item, Henry Ford Museum bought this Play School baby monitor, which the museum wisely added to its collection, along with the instructions and all of the product packaging, which is usually tossed in the trash. Now, I don't think there's a collector market for, random styrofoam product packaging. No? No, I'm getting, there is? There is. You're kidding. Oh, I had no idea. Well, see, I'm new. I don't know. You have to tell me. A few years later, this was how the comparison looked in the magazine, on the last page of Popular Mechanics. So you will see this. I'm going to show some of these a little bit more quickly, but you see how we did it here. And for your future ephemeral documentation needs, I want to point out that Henry Ford Museum, from its beginning in 1929, collected new products. It also has an extensive collection of what they call product literature, which you probably also call it, product manuals and marketing materials. And then at some point, the curators realized that they couldn't really collect more than a fraction of the flood of 20th century consumer products. So in addition to product lit, they also started collecting catalogs from a really wide variety of sources. So if you ever need that kind of thing, they got it. So what of baby monitors today? Well, an endless array of video monitors now compete for your inattention, like this LB Tech EasyView with its portable monitor. Of course, it's already passé, tossed aside in favor of monitors that give you live updates and images on your phone via those all-purpose Inventions, Wi-Fi, and apps. I took these photos just a couple of months ago. I told my friend what I was doing, and she immediately pulls out that LB Tech, and she says, I used to use this, but now I just use the one. I threw it out. I got the one on my phone now. So, talk about ephemeral. I lost my thing again. There we go. If you think that security cameras catching thieves on your front porch is new. Think again. This is Catching a Thief with a Camera from 1914. When subscribers got this issue, they might have been inspired to duplicate this setup from Catching a Thief with a Camera. I keep losing my mouse. A farmer whose melons were regularly stolen aimed a concealed camera at a ripe melon with a trip line connected to the shutter. Then all he had to do, and this sounds like what you were talking about, this whole process that you have to go through. The next morning, he had to rush the film to his dark room, print the perp pic, and mail it to the person stealing his melons, whom he recognized, along with a sternly worded letter. So it was a little easier by the time we get to 1999, when it was featured in Popular Mechanics, when you could see set up a closed-circuit network of cameras and monitor them on your computer via the internet, which of course we had to explain to people still in 1999. You could even set it to call or email you when the motion detector was activated. And today, well, of course, you've seen all the ads. They're everywhere. This is another screen grab from Popular Mechanics website. There's Ring Doorbell, Vivint, Simply Safe, ADT, etc. This is a screenshot of Popular Mechanics website comparing security systems for 2025. Just like the new baby monitors, of course, the physical installation is augmented with Wi-Fi and smartphone apps 111 years after that farmer caught a thief with his camera. So, let's work backwards this time. You all know FaceTime, right? Or Zoom, or any of a million apps that let you see the person you're talking to. Well, check out Phone Users See Each Other by Television from 1934. Now, in 1934, we barely had television at all. The TVs in use then were still mechanical scanning devices with teeny little pictures. Those were first demonstrated in 1925. The first vacuum tube-based TV was demonstrated in 1936, 2 years after this appeared in Popular Mechanics. So this is a mechanical scanning television device that they were trying to use to see each other by television while talking on the phone. In the early 2000s, we compared it to teleconferencing, a cumbersome but workable arrangement requiring several pieces of hardware plus a TV set. It was mostly used for business, despite the family shown here using the PictureTel brand. Of course, all that hardware went away pretty quickly when Skype and then Zoom and their many competitors came out, entirely based on the internet. If you're wondering, though, what all that scribbling is on the page, it is researcher gold. I went to Popular Mechanics New York City offices in 1989 to examine their collection of Popular Mechanics magazines. It's probably the only complete collection back to the very first issue. The editor who showed it to me mentioned how annoying it was that someone had ruined a bunch of them by writing all over the pages. Now, before I went there, I knew about Popular Mechanics' editorial policy from the 1920s to the 1940s, which was this. It is the policy of this magazine never to accept compensation in any form for what appears in our reading pages, and also to avoid all appearance of doing so, we are obligated to omit the name of the maker or seller of any article described. This information, however, is kept on file and will be furnished free upon request. There were lots of letters going into Popular Mechanics asking for this information. And isn't that quaint, though? I mean, now almost the only purpose of a magazine is to do product placement. So as I flipped through a few of these issues, it dawned on me that was how they were keeping track of the information. That was how they kept the information on file. Somebody just wrote the inventor, the producer, the whatever, sometimes even with patent numbers right on the pages. So I'm standing there looking at this going, oh my God, oh my God. So all of a sudden, I could figure out who made this television phone, which was Television Exhibits Corporation, who made the baby monitor, who made that giant phonograph, who made that pump shoe, and all kinds of other things. So, oops, I skipped ahead. Oh, come on. It does not want to behave. Okay. So the manufacturer information really made my Think It's New, Think Again articles far richer, and it's information that would have been lost otherwise. So here is to the power of ephemera. And now I'm going to blitz through a few more. We have car seats for kids, 1921. Some of you, like I do, remember standing up in the back seat, or even worse, in the front seat. So you might be surprised to see this solution from 1921, which obviously did not catch on. But basically, you stuck your baby in a bag and attached it to the back seat. So in 1999, when I wrote for Popular Mechanics, I called it the world's first airbag. Get it? Get it? Come on. Thank you very much. I need the rim shot. Here's another one, fax machines in 1997. And facsimile writing at long distance from 1905. A man can sit at his room in a hotel in San Francisco and sign a check in New York, which the cashier of the bank there will honor when the new device for long-distance facsimile writing comes into general use. And yes, fax machines are still used today, only occasionally, usually for like medical records or something where privacy is important. But this, the 1905 facsimile writing piece that was in Popular Mechanics, that wasn't even the first one. There were earlier ones, which probably some of you know about. Next, we have the gas-electric hybrid automobiles. In case you think that these ideas are all trivial, I'm talking about the kind that you see driving around every day. This was an article from 1914 in Popular Mechanics about a car that ran on both gas and electricity and would switch back and forth. Of course, computers make that much, much smoother and better now. But 1914, that wasn't even the first one. They go all the way back to the very earliest days of automobiles. We have inline skates. They were huge in the 1990s when we did this exhibit. They were also big in the 1910s. And in that little picture in the corner, in the 1950s. Of course, since 1910, they were reinvented with new materials, one-piece construction, and a brake. We also have adjustable brake and accelerator pedals. Some of you vertically challenged people might have these in your giant SUV. Back in 2000, it was one of Ford's better ideas. You know, you could press a button and the pedals would come up to meet your feet. But here's a similar idea back from 1910. This is one of my favorites, a navigation system from 1922. You basically took a little box with a little scrolling map and you attached it with a cable to your speedometer, and then it would scroll at the same about the same pace that you were driving, and you would be able to see your progress going along this road. Of course, if you turned right or left, you would have to stop, take out the map, put in a new one. But look at the little picture, you know, even from the 90s, you know, these things have come so far. You know, today it just sort of syncs with, you know, the map app on your phone. You actually had to have a little remote in your car to access this thing. So I'm going back to toothbrushes for a minute. We are going to do a lightning round. And I'm going to show you a bunch of innovative toothbrushes from 1921 to 1925, all of them from Popular Mechanics, like almost everything else I'm showing you. So you remember this one, which I would definitely be afraid to stick in my mouth. There was new toothbrush cleans all surfaces of the teeth. It was kind of a wraparound rubbery thing. New toothbrush sterilizer keeps brush sanitary. Automatic toothbrush attaches to faucet. Water pick, anybody? And she looks so happy to be using that. A toothbrush, which is made entirely of rubber instead of having the usual bristles, and which can be sterilized in boiling water without injuring the composition. Toothbrush sterilizer, which holds 5 brushes and paste while being disinfected by antiseptic fumes. Ew, yeah. Toothbrush is easy to clean as bristle rows open. Ultra sanitary toothbrush has removable bristles. And the simplest of all, this is something, if you have an old house, you might still have one of these in your bathroom. You just flip the cup over the top of the brushes to keep them from getting, contaminated. And I have seen articles so recently about if you keep your toothbrush in your bathroom and you flush the toilet, well, this is so simple. So what? Who cares? What do all these anachronisms mean, if anything? Well, they are certainly evidence of the amazing human capacity for inventiveness and the Western belief, at least I think it's especially strong in this country, that technology can solve almost every problem, even the ones that technology itself creates. So I'm going to leave you with a final story about one of the greatest technological anachronisms of all time. You might have heard about Charles Babbage. He designed and damn near built a mechanical computer in 1820 called the difference engine. It was an automatic mechanical calculator intended to complete tables for many functions of engineering, science, and navigation. Although he wasn't able to overcome the great expense and difficulty of building a complete working model, others have since done so. Aren't museums great? But you literally turned a crank on this thing to make it work. And it worked. When writing about the difference engine, historian Jenny Uglow noted that she noted the radical anachronism of an automatic computing device designed in the 1820s. Such failed inventions, she wrote, are ideas that lie like yellowing blueprints in old cupboards to be stumbled upon afresh by later generations. Or, I humbly suggest, ideas that lie in yellowing popular mechanics to be stumbled upon afresh by later generations. Now, if you're feeling inventive, I suggest flipping through some old popular mechanics for inspiration. The magazines and their ideas might be ephemeral, but the problems are eternal, just waiting to be solved. Now, I don't know about you, but my feet hurt, so I'm going to go back to my flying car and pump up my shoes. Yeah. That was a lot. Questions? Any questions? I don't know if I can answer them. Oh, there's loads. I think there's a microphone coming around. And I did it in 30 minutes. No one thought it could be done. 73 slides.
Hello. First of all, that was such a fun presentation. Thank you so much. My question is sort of looking at this and looking back at all these trends that are resurfacing in today's world, especially through social media. If you were to put this idea back into an exhibition today, how would you format it? Would you do all 3 renditions? Would you sort of look to the future? How would you sort of formulate it now?
Boy, that's a great question that I had not thought about. It's weird because so much stuff now is it's all online, you know. I mean, there's hard, even like some of those the home security setups. Like there's physical components to them, but so much of how you deal with it is, on your phone or on a computer. It'd be an interesting challenge. I think I would actually really like to work on that now that you mention it. But I think that I guess I would approach it. There's some people in the academic world now who are actually studying things like repair and maintenance. It wasn't, that kind of thing wasn't being studied when I did this, or when we did this. I cut Barbara out of that. But you hear all this innovation speak now that's not real innovation, at least in my opinion. There's sort of this concept that anything new is better, when really an awful lot of old stuff still works perfectly well. And I think that sometimes you just need to point that out to people, like put these things in juxtaposition, and people come to that realization themselves. So that's about as good as I can do, but maybe I'll take the challenge.
Perfect. Thank you.
The microphone is being passed.
Where do we need it?
There's people all over who.
All right.
who ask questions I can't answer.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I'm a magazine collector, among other things, and I was wondering, did you collect the actual magazines, or did you access them in libraries?
Oh, we collected the actual magazines, and in fact, we drove up the price of Popular Mechanics. The ones that they had, when I went to the Pop Mechanics headquarters and looked at their collection, I was hoping they were individual issues, but they had them bound. So you couldn't get a clean scan of the cover, and the covers were so important to this project. I thought, all right, we have to get them. And that was a long time ago. It was before eBay and things like that. You know, you didn't have these online marketplaces. So I just started going to flea markets and, and I went regularly. And I had my list. Like, I would cross things off when I got them. I went back to a flea market that I went to a lot, and I said, wow, the price has gone up on these. And the guy said, yeah, somebody's buying up a whole bunch of them. We can't figure out who. It's me. So yeah, so Henry Ford Museum now has, it's not entirely complete because the really early issues, when they were just a local magazine in Chicago, those are super, super rare. But yeah, we did buy them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You had a beautiful September Popular Mechanics cover with a large gramophone.
Yes.
And in the corner, a man was holding up a thing saying number 5. I wonder if that was one of the shows that Edison was doing where he would challenge people to tell which was his phonograph and which was a live performer. And I find those incredible because it shows how technology influences our judgments.
Yeah.
And also that we think those machines were bad, and we don't hear them when they're brand new.
Yeah.
And that actually, I've heard people say that those early big Edison recordings were actually very clear, but still I can't imagine they were as clear as a singer in a booth next to them. Do you know if that article was about those Edison shows?
It wasn't. In fact, they didn't really have much of an article. There was just a little notice that, somebody had come up with this idea to do concerts on a phonograph in an outdoor amphitheater. So it wasn't that. But coincidentally, I wrote all of the text for the Edison National Historic Site with, where he developed an awful lot of these things, including the phonograph and the moving pictures. I shouldn't say his staff. When they went from a guided tour to having, labels, sort of a path through a self-guided tour, I did all the writing for that. And what an amazing place. If you've never been there, it's awesome. But his recording studio, you've probably been there, is up in the upper floors. And yeah, that was a big thing. They were, but then you see that same idea, is it live or Memorex? When they came out with the cassette tapes, it's the same thing. People keep doing the same thing. Any more questions? Oh, there's one right here first.
Hi, thank you so much. There was some of those related non-popular science magazines that had really fantastic illustrations, some of the earlier 20th century ones, and they reminded me a lot of early science fiction publications and pulps with the serialized stories. And I was wondering if there was any cross-pollination that between artists or authors in those sort of science fiction works and these sort of more arguably grounded in reality, but maybe not entirely. I was thinking especially of that one with the isolator looked very similar to,
Isn't that hilarious? And I don't know the answer to that. That would be a really interesting thing to look into. I know that Popular Mechanics hired artists to do their cover illustrations, and they would do paintings and then literally reproduce them. And of course, them being able to produce those really cool color covers, that was a printing innovation, as you know. For some reason, they were the first of that kind of magazine to do that. They said, how do we make our covers full color? Let's do it. But they own their own printing press. And unfortunately, when they were sold to Hearst, Their headquarters were in Chicago till the 1950s. They had kept all of those paintings, the original paintings that they made their covers from, which must have been amazing. When Hearst bought it, they just trashed all that stuff. And there was one employee who saw it all going out and took a few home. And we had initially thought about doing the exhibit based on the cover art because it was so awesome. But they had sort of a stable of people that they used, so I doubt that Popular Mechanics had much overlap, but it could be that other artists certainly would have been hawking their wares to anyone who would publish it. So yeah, that early sci-fi stuff could easily, could have been some overlap. I like the pause between questions. I get to regroup my thoughts.
I noticed in one of the visuals that there was a Mechanics illustrated image of, I think, the Aston Martin and Goldfinger, and I can't believe nobody's asked you this. How were you involved in the missing Aston Martin and Goldfinger?
Well, I told you that most of those copies that I showed pictures of were ones I had sitting around my office, including that one. Right before I left Henry Ford Museum, I had risen to the powerful position of being able to overrule actual curators in terms of what went on exhibit on the floor. And there was the guy who owned that car was having it placed all around the country in different museums. They were hoping to keep it in the public eye and maybe increase its value because they were going to sell it at some point. And they came to Henry Ford Museum, said, "Can you exhibit this car?" And the curator of transportation, Bob Casey at the time, said, "Nah, it's not a real car, it's just a movie car, blah, 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 blah." And I said, no, it's really cool. Like, because I was a Bond fan, so I was saying, it has lit people's imaginations, it spawned all these other products. They had just recently brought it back. There was like a 35-year hiatus between when it was last in the movies in Thunderball. It was in Goldfinger, made a brief appearance in Thunderball. 35 years later, they brought it back for one movie, and this was right at that time. And I said, we're going to do it. So we developed a little exhibit around it based on the pop culture of Bond, basically. And 3 months after it left Henry Ford Museum and went back to its home in Florida, it was stolen. I ended up being in the trial over the disposition of the insurance money. And because I had worked with the guy who was placing the car and taking it all around to these museums was not the guy who owned the car. They had been brothers-in-law. They had a verbal agreement. Then there was a divorce. They were no longer related. They were arguing over who was going to get the money. And because I had worked with the one guy, they did a deposition, and they asked me, there was a book written about it called The Most Famous Car in the World. And they asked me in the deposition, do you think it's the most famous car in the world? And off the top of my head, I said, no. They were kind of surprised. They said, well, which one is? And again, off the top of my head, I said, I think it's the car that John Kennedy was shot in, which oddly was on exhibit about 20 feet away from where we had the Bond car, because it's at Henry Ford Museum. I said, because it's always in the public eye. There's the Zapruder films, there's the conspiracy theories about what happened to him and who actually shot him. And there's movies about it, there's books about it. So it's always in the public eye. So I think that one's more famous. Well, it turned out that was their whole theory of the case. So they actually had me go. I know this is a really long, weird answer, but I don't want to have to explain it 20 times at the reception tonight. They had me come down in person and testify because they wanted my opinion. And to do that, they had to make me an expert witness. So I answered a few questions on the stand about my work with automotive museums, and they made me an expert witness, which meant I could give my opinion. So it was very weird. And now it's turned into a cottage industry. I'm in a 8-part podcast. I was one of the interviewees. Narrated by Elizabeth Hurley, so that was kind of cool. I'm about to be in a documentary that's going to get released sometime this year, I hope, called Snow Shadow. It's going to be 3 parts. I don't know what streaming service it's going to be on. But they told me that I ended up being the Greek chorus of the of the documentary. I'm like, what does that mean? It's just on, this documentary is just on the Goldfinger car that got stolen. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote exhibit texts. Chicago Science and Industry just did an exhibit on the science of bond, and I wrote all of the text for that. And when I sent in the proposal, I said, I bet no one else who's applying to do this work has testified in a trial over the theft of the Goldfinger car. And they said, yes, you would be right. Nobody's ever done that. So I got the job. What? No, that's the great thing about this. It's still an ongoing mystery. Although I have my own theories, but I'll save that. I'm not going to tell you. So you're going to have to find the documentary that I'm in, and then you will learn all. But no, it's never been found. Yeah. Yeah, it's a stick shift. It's yeah.
This is a collaboration or an aggregation of several points about your talk. You started with a mentioning of light bulb technologies and introduced a concept of half-life. And when considering that the light bulbs' half-lives now are so short, we have a different metaphorical frame in which
Yes.
we find this, the re-emergent Luddites who appreciate former technologies
Yeah.
for these newer technologies whose falling half-lives are no longer as engaging as we are supposed to permit. Do you have
Yeah.
any comments in general in that field?
Oh, man. I think that the frame, the sort of the lens through which we view technology is always changing. And I think that we're going to see more and more people perhaps resisting a bit of where things are going. You see that already. You know, there's AI everywhere. You know, even if you don't personally use it yourself, it's sort of becoming part of everything. And I think this is probably the last question, so I will put a button on it by saying that there is a book called where is it? The Innovation Delusion by Andrew Russell and Lee Vinsel. And I was reading this book. I have it, because I think about innovation a lot. And then I was listening to a podcast by one of them, and he was talking about the book. And he talked about how people really like to focus on this shiny object of innovation, always creating new things, always bringing new ideas into organizations and businesses. But he says that's at the neglect of maintaining things, and that often maintenance is way more cost-effective and way more important than innovation. And the thing that jumped out at me, though, because I had just developed this whole presentation, in fact, I thought, can I go back and fit this in there? I had this whole riff about toothbrushes at the end. He talks about maintenance and the importance of maintaining your people if you're in a business, if you're in an organization, making sure that they're safe, they're comfortable, that they are fully engaged in their work and all that kind of thing. And he said a lot of intuitive ideas have been washed away because of the cultural context that we're in, which is predominantly but not exclusively Western, as I mentioned earlier, that really privileges the shiny object. And here's what he said. He said, "It's understandable why people like shiny objects, but sometimes people need to be reminded to brush their teeth." And I went, oh my God, that's exactly what I was doing. So I don't know if that really answered the question.
It's a beautiful encapsulation.
Yeah. So brush your teeth, people.
We have one last
That is
question.
it, and I will.
We have one last question.
Oh, is there one? Okay,
Yes.
great.
Mary, I couldn't explain in the introduction, but I'm going to ask you to explain to everybody here who may not know what it is. What is 24 hours of lemons?
Oh, 20. I'm just going to talk about cars now for the next 45 minutes. I do 24 Hours of Lemons Racing, which is a play on the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I see a few people nodding. Some people, do you do it too? I do. Oh, you don't. You just. It's hilarious if you just Google 24 hours of lemons. You will see what I mean. But you buy a $500 car, then you spend, it's so stupid, then you spend several $1,000s getting it actually ready to race, and it has to pass inspection, so you have to have a roll cage, you have to have the racing harness and the seats and the whole, everything, fire suppression. Then you theme your car, and then you put on costumes, and then you go racing. And they do these races all over the country. The theme of our car is Hell Kitty. We've been doing this since 2010. It's Hello Kitty, except it's a skull and crossbones with the giant eyes and the big bow. And kids love it. I also got known for doing songs. I write a song during every race about the race that we're in. And then I sing it right before they do the awards presentation. So there's videos of me, if you look for the Lemons videos. Our car is a 1988 Honda Prelude SI. It's on its third engine. It's about to get its fourth. So we're not doing the race next month because we're going to be swapping engines. Anyway, it's hilarious. It really is fun. If there's one near you, go see it just for a laugh. I mean, it's so... They don't take themselves seriously, and obviously neither do I, because I just made jokes the whole presentation. This is why I'm not an academic, right? Anyway. Okay.
Our next